Okay, I will get started. Thank you. Thanks, Sean, Aaron. I am Kira, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am Nava's editorial manager. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that we're highlighting in this year's report, and then I will introduce our panelists. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Cool. So, like Sha said, the theme of this year's report is improving every level of service delivery. So I'll begin with talking about one of our projects that aims to influence and improve an ecosystem, that ecosystem being unemployment insurance. As most here probably know, the pandemic exposed weaknesses within our country's unemployment insurance technology. In response, the U.S. Department of Labor spearheaded efforts to help states modernize their unemployment insurance programs, funded through the American Rescue Plan, or ARPA. As part of this work, the department partnered with Nava to spearhead research that resulted in targeted recommendations for how states can improve delivery of unemployment insurance benefits. We also supported the department in publishing a report on how states are using ARPA funds to detect and prevent fraud, promote equitable access to unemployment insurance, and ensure timely payment of benefits. Given this work, we are delighted to welcome Andrew Stetner, Director of Unemployment Insurance Modernization at the U.S. Department of Labor. Welcome, Andrew. Okay, zooming in a bit, the state of New Jersey's unemployment insurance program is an example of successful modernization. This year, they launched their new claimant portal, which enables people to apply for benefits in fewer steps than the legacy application, save and finish their application later, and apply on any device. We had the privilege of helping New Jersey build the claimant portal, and our iterative approach enabled us to minimize risk while quickly delivering value to New Jerseyans. We also helped implement an API that connects the claimant portal to the staff-facing backend. Representing the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development, I'm pleased to welcome Commissioner Robert Asaro-Angelo. Another state program that's delivering excellent services to its constituents is the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Paid Family and Medical Leave. Since 2020, Nava has supported Massachusetts in building and maintaining the state's first ever Paid Family and Medical Leave, or PFML program. As part of our work, we helped Massachusetts develop the Paid Leave API and a backend API layer that enables several different state systems to communicate with the PFML website and with one another. As a result, the state's PFML program is more flexible, resilient, and human-centered. In addition to our work in Massachusetts, we began working with 2 more state paid leave programs this year. We're proud of these efforts and look forward to supporting a thriving paid leave ecosystem. Today, our paid family and medical leave expert is Tara McGinnis, founder and executive director of the New Practice Lab at New America. The New Practice Lab is focused on design and research to provide economic security to the public. The New Practice Lab has partnered with multiple states launching their paid family and medical leave programs and is an expert in this vital new policy. Welcome, Tara. Okay, so something that unemployment insurance and paid family and medical leave have in common is that people tend to need them during major life events. The federal government understands this and has implemented several life experience projects aimed at connecting people with services they need during such times. Nava is working on the Facing Financial Shock project, which seeks to help people find the support they need to reestablish financial stability. We're helping the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services and the United States Digital Service increase access to programs like Medicaid and SNAP by streamlining the income verification process. We're thrilled that Patricia Peroso, a digital services expert at the United States Digital Service, working on the Facing Financial Shock project, has joined us today. Welcome, Patricia. So as you can see, our work this year has spanned programs, agencies, and levels of service delivery, from focusing on specific updates through end-to-end service delivery and even working on improving ecosystems. So with that, I will pass the mic to Karen, who will get the panel rolling. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kira. Hey, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. Great. So my name's Karen Turner. My pronouns are she, her. I'm the Strategic Communications Manager here at Nava, and I'm so excited to talk to this incredible panel about all the great issues that they're working on. Just a reminder that we're going to have 5 to 15 minutes or so for Q&A at the end. So think about questions you might want to ask, and we'll open it up both to folks inside the room and to everyone joining via the online event. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to direct my first question to you, Tara. So New America has worked with multiple states on improving their paid family medical leave programs. Tell us a little bit about how policy informs implementation and vice versa when it comes to these programs.
Sure, and thank you for having me here. This is an amazing panel of people who I really admire, and a room of people who are so focused on just learning and doing and making things better. Your question of how policy informs implementation and implementation informs policy is really my cup of tea. The New Practice Lab is an unusual organization that is equal parts in our recipe, policy, and product. And so often you have kind of in the world technology companies with some policy people, policy teams with some technology people. We have a thesis, and it shows up in our work on paid leave, although I should honestly let Commissioner Sarah Angelo speak about it, because our first partner on Sprint for delivering paid leave was New Jersey.
We were your first? I didn't even know that.
2019.
Wow. You guys seem very experienced.
So if it's helpful, I'll tell you a little bit about how we do this. Now in 13 states in the United States have paid family medical leave. Only about 27% of workers have access through their employer to paid family medical leave. This means that we have a long way to go to have all Americans have access to it. But in theory, every time we make a new policy like this, we should be exponentially improving our capacity to make it work. And I think that is the project that a number of us are undertaking. New Jersey had paid family medical leave for a number of years, but wasn't seeing the uptake in the policy. And so we gave the team in New Jersey a full, in-house Sprint team to get under the hood, talk to people using the program, talk to people who might have used the program but didn't, talk to the stakeholders in the business community who are communicating with their employees about it, and get in the back end and see what does data inside the system that maybe the administrators can't see every day tell you about what to do. There have been a number of amazing changes that New Jersey has made as a result of it, and some of the learning is really basic. For example, job protection. Will I lose my job if I take this? Was people's number one question. Job protection is not under the authority of the Department of Labor where the project is housed. And so the department didn't want to put anything out about job protection. That's the Civil Rights Division. But that was people's number one question. And so if you can't answer it, you can't pass go. And the team did creative things to make sure you could answer that question or be directed to the call line of another agency. Part of this process of implementation, learning for what's happening and where you're doing something somewhere before you make a policy again. Connecticut was in the process of passing a new paid family medical leave program. There are kinds of things that you might not think, and as a former person who drafted and worked on policy laws, you may not know it's just not the best idea to pick a date when the product team will be ready, or things like a lot of agencies have data that could help us with this, but unless we say really specifically that these agencies named in the law need to help on reaching people, then it's a territory fight for the agencies later. And so Connecticut took some of the advice of the delivery experience of other states, including very specifically data, like saying any data in these agencies could be used to help get paid family medical leave. And that's one example of where having the experience of delivering on the ground graduates into writing better code in the form of law that is more implementable. And that's really at the center of what we're doing now in a number of different states.
Thank you so much. Great. All right, let's actually move to you, Robert, since you mentioned New Jersey. New Jersey is in this process of overhauling its unemployment insurance system in recent years to great success. So tell us a little bit about the importance of building these user-friendly portals for customers, for users, but also for staff agency.
Yep. Thanks, Karen. Thanks, Nava, for having me, and Tara, I didn't realize that we were your first customer. That's awesome. So we still use those sprints every single day. We're currently going through modernization, not with Nava on that project, but we use those findings every single day. And one thing I'm very proud of is that we've doubled the number of fathers using paid family leave through outreach in New Jersey as well. Yes. But to the question at hand, I mean, during the COVID crisis, and, just for some background, who folks who aren't as nerdy about this stuff as I am, during the first year of COVID, half of my counterparts across the country lost their jobs because they were thrown under the bus by their governor or the legislature, and it was none of their faults. Luckily in New Jersey, we have a amenable chain of command, and my boss, my governor, was into asking us questions about what's going on. He realized it's going on in other states as well. And I say that because I ran for chair of NAS, the National Association of State Workforce Agencies, because I didn't want any Department of Labor staff to go through what my staff was going through ever again. And that is implicitly tied with the customer experience. As worried as I am about folks who are eligible for unemployment benefits, I'm equally as worried for those who weren't eligible or who weren't understanding about why they were eligible or ineligible, because those are the ones making death threats to my staff. Those are the ones calling 17,000 times a day, keeping our staff from being able to talk to folks who actually needed help. So when I talk about any of our UI modernization or any of our modernizations, it's equally about the customer experience, which inherently ties to our staff experience. And I think that was a really good selling point to our staff because this stuff is not easy. Obviously, change of government is very difficult, but I love the idea of policy being code. I think it's a great way to talk about the interlockingness of this. But from day one, it was obvious that the better we communicated with customers and claimants, one, the less times they had to call and take up call center staff time, not because I wanted our staff to be doing nothing, because they had other claimants to talk to. From day one of the pandemic through recently, it was almost impossible to get through on the phones because so many people were calling over and over and over again. By the way, same thing with paid family leave as well. The more we can talk to folks about what's going on with their claim, it doesn't have to be a yes or no on their benefits or how much they're going to get. Here's what's next. Here's the current status of your claim. Here's more information about the program. Here's what to do if you need financial help right now. So I'm interested in hearing about more about that. So giving them some kind of, to reduce their anxiety from having to call over and over again, and give them that peace of mind at least to know what's next. We're still striving for that. We're still working every single day to improve those communications, to let claimants know where they are in the process. There's no end to all this, right? There's no end to modernization. It's something I've sort of tried to gird our folks for, that this is not a waterfall project where one day we're going to flip a switch and everything's going to be done, that we're constantly improving, constantly hearing from our customers and claimants, and constantly, by the way, enforcing the new code, the new policy changes that are coming through. So I think they get it, that we can't go back to how it was before, not just for our claimants that we serve, but for our own staff's mental and physical well-being, quite frankly.
Thank you. Yeah, process is so important. And also, I welcome everyone to get very wonky with your answers, because that's definitely this audience, so go for it. All right, speaking of unemployment insurance, so Andy, the U.S. Department of Labor, has invested so much in improving unemployment insurance systems since the pandemic, which, exposed so many shortcomings in the national system. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those improvements?
Sure. So first, let me thank everyone for coming, and also thank Nava for the great partnership. You guys lived your credo in continually adjusting your delivery, doing things that we never thought you'd do when you first came to us, and everything was stellar. I was just talking to one of your staff, and we look at the beautiful artifacts you left us on our website every day, and how meaningful they are in communicating what we want the system to become. So COVID was the perfect storm for the unemployment insurance system. Regular UI claims increased 3,000% in 1 week, and then Congress passed 4 new programs, including for brand new populations that the UI program had never served, like the self-employed, where it was very difficult, to verify income. And to, what you said, Tara, about the specific due date. Well, Congress passed the CARES Act on March 28th, and benefits were payable on April 4th. So that was the expectation that Congress put on Rob and other people like that. It was unsurprising that we had all the challenges that we had, despite lifting up the economy, huge delays in benefits and real challenges in preventing fraud. So Congress did pass American Rescue Plan Act, including $2 billion for UI modernization, and we could have done it the way that we've done it before, which basically is just divide up that money based on state size and just pass it right through and have them do big IT projects with the vendors that we all know about, and the benefit of those would come in 5 years. So we decided we weren't going to do it that way. We were going to take a more agile and incremental and modular approach. We sent tiger teams, multidisciplinary experts, into states voluntarily to identify short and medium-term operational improvements that they could do. We gave grants to particularly focus on equitable access and customer experience. And the result of that was 600 different discrete projects on things like automation, including claim status portal, improving the online customer experience, bringing plain language into communication, each of them delivering the value along the way. We have also been focusing on the architecture of UI systems, that were not resilient enough to respond to this increase in demand. That's a continuing issue for UI, because UI is very low right now and the unemployment is low in the country, and it can spike very rapidly, and it's spiking more rapidly than in the past in recent cycles. So we focused, we gave $200 million of that funding to states to really work on their architecture and their methodology, to focus more on agile development, modular and microservice infrastructure, and to move their services onto the cloud. And in doing the projects they're working on with us, focus on measurable improvements, either for their own processes or for their end users as a result of every project. So we are making tremendous progress. We've seen it, especially over the last year, as states have taken our grant funding, implemented, and seeing really results. Results, like you were saying, and fewer people making those calls over and over again, fewer duplicate calls for the same issues. If we can more clearly communicate what the individual needs and what's their next step, on their claim status project. Just another example I wanted to give. Before coming to the department, I had met Tara when I was at the Century Foundation, and we did a survey, and we talked to every single state that had gone through a large-scale modernization, and it was something in the 30s or 40s of the states. We found one of those states that had done user testing before they went live. And predictably, there was all kinds of problems, with the systems. That has changed. Customer user experience testing, customer experience measurement, it's becoming a nascent and more enduring part of the UI system. So we are continuing to do that work. I'm very grateful for Nava. One thing we want to do is we want to tell the story. That's why it's so important for us to be here tonight. Most people in this room probably themselves or knew someone who struggled to get their access to UI benefits, during the pandemic. And we want to kind of be out there and say, no, we are improving that so that customer experience will be better the next time the system is called on. Whether it's a natural disaster, like we're experiencing right now, with Hurricane Helene, or whether it's, something that's more national in scope. So we are making those concrete improvements to the system along the way to a larger scale transformation.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great, and I really want to sort of move over to Patricia and talk about an issue that all of these programs kind of struggle with. But the Facing Financial Shock program, was looking to improve the customer experience for programs including Medicaid and SNAP. I really want to ask you about specifically in the income verification process and why streamlining it is such an important issue in this program.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you everyone for listening to me talk about income verification. I know that it's a niche topic and I'm very excited to talk to you about it. I really identify with a point you made earlier, Commissioner, around the customer experience needing to work both for your caseworker or your staff and for the public. And I think income verification is a classic problem where it is working for nobody, right? We have all of these means tested programs where in statute, we must check that you are eligible based on your income. And the tools we have are just not meeting anyone's needs. So when asking state leadership, income verification was the single biggest pain point on their plates. And when doing discovery with the public for people facing a financial shock, income verification was the single biggest pain point in their journey to getting government benefits. We'd like to solve both of those in one. I can keep talking more about why income verification, or I could stop there. I don't
Push
know.
for enhanced wage records.
Oh.
So that way UI systems get their wages more frequently than every quarter.
Yes. Oh my goodness. State quarterly wage data is exactly a problem. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
She said to go nerdy.
Yes. So you may or may not be aware, states collect quarterly records of your wage data. It's used for a bunch of different purposes. One is for means-tested programs. So it's actually in statute that SNAP programs have to check your state quarterly wage data. And also, your state quarterly wage data is not fresh enough to meet the SNAP requirements for how soon your data has to be eligible for a verification. So that is absolutely one way to do this. That is a very long-term project and can and should be done. Our team unfortunately doesn't have that time horizon, so we've had to take a more iterative approach, and we've been focusing on facilitating access to data that you yourself own, right? Like you own your payroll account, right? Like your account with whoever is paying you, that is your data. And you can choose to facilitate access to that, and that as a way of getting sort of the source of truth from applicants themselves consenting to sharing their own data.
Can I pull a thread on this?
Please, yeah.
Which is back to this loop of when the code is written into the law and the implementation then becomes more complicated. In this process, the wage verification or income verification overall is a common pain point across programs that we work on all three that we've discussed. And very recently, like in a kind of TA work on a law, someone had a draft that was going to pull on a wage database that didn't exist. And I was like, before you decide that this is what you're going to verify, like that is a database that is variable across 50 states. And they're like, no, it exists. I was like, yes, but in every other program it isn't functioning. So creating this feedback loop between what are the pain points for both frontline workers and users of a program and the next generation. I mean, we are creating new policy on income verification all the time, or reifying this. Similarly, across a wide range of programs, there would be some logic to using somewhat similar processes, and so therefore you could do once income verification, but that is really again back to the design of where a family is defined 19 different ways, or income is defined 19 different ways, and for this it counts against your taxes, and for this it doesn't. So really what the learning across all of these programs can be the next generation of creating policies that really work for people.
Yeah, and I think just kind of pulling on that more, talking about processes across different programs, I'm really interested in the relationship between federal agencies and state, as well as states between each other, and how can these bodies work collaboratively to improve and modernize service experiences across the board. This is for everyone, but maybe I'll start with you, Andy, because I know the Open UI initiative is something.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of our learnings in coming in, modernizing, working with USDS and others was, there's 53 different states. Their laws are different enough, and our authority as a federal partner, we can't tell them how to build their architecture. We can't tell them how to spend every dollar. So we wanted to really focus on more pulling them towards best practices rather than pushing down exactly how to do. And how do you create some structures for the states to be able to share code, to not have to reinvent the wheel every time that they're building a system. One very common thing that is happening, state X needs to replace their system. There was a state that was a far-flung jurisdiction, literally fly around the country to 7 different states to look at different RFPs and see how to build their system. There's got to be a better way to do that. So we created what's called our Open UI initiative. The goal of that, we're working with the association that Robert mentioned that he's as the past president of, to think about what are the core modules in the UI system and what do they need to do. What is their function and what are the data in and data out? So you kind of create the specifications that become common. That allows states to start building things that become more shareable. It also creates a framework for states that have open source technology or own their code to think about, okay, here's a way that I actually could share it. because right now, states say, I'd love to share my code with another state, but I don't know how to take out the things that are just my state from the things that every state needs. So we're trying to make that possible to do. And so we have a website for that, the Open UI Initiative, NASWA. So definitely recommend folks taking a look at that.
I would just say, just going back to the initial presentation tonight, all these things that we have that are aspirational about enhanced wage records or better parental leave policies or income verification, like the APIs that we now have in New Jersey will give us that chance to access that data in the future. Because the current state in New Jersey and other places, like let's just say tomorrow, enhanced wage records were the thing around the country. Most states have to go beg their vendor to go, oh, hey, can you build me a new system to access that? Okay, well, get me a new statement of work and get me a new RFP and blah, 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 blah. And it'll take 17 months. But we are now set up to be able to access that kind of data or data from other state agencies. Like right now, talk with our Motor Vehicle Commission to get more data from them to help verify a bajillion things about our claimants. So that kind of flexibility that we have in our infrastructure lets us have better policy down the road.
Yeah, we've definitely had a problem with that. We have focused on states as the first customers of our sort of income verification service, with the concept that if we build it with states, we can force the rest of the federal government to get on board instead of going the other direction. I feel like there have been so many projects that have gone the other direction and then states were like, this is not usable for us. And so we've really focused on the state experience of utilizing our services. At the same time, vendor lock-in is a real problem, and there exist a number of states that do not have the technical staff to be able to say to their vendor, this is unreasonable, and don't have control over their backlog in a way that you really need to be able to update and stay compliant, but also really focus on the customer experience, right? If your vendor is the one determining everything, there are states where people don't have enough of a say, and I think that's really a part of the skill gap, right? Like my background is as a software engineer. There are times and places where I'm able to say like, that is an unreasonable estimate, or if that is the estimate, let's understand what's wrong with the system because your system should not take this amount of time to try to accomplish whatever improvement goal you have. And I think that there are a number of states that have really modernized. Like I want to call out like the Colorado Digital Service. I think they just had their 5-year anniversary, right? Like they are sort of pioneers on trying to push forward the state capacity. But right now there are a number of places that are, even if you are building services, not really ready to take advantage of them because of the exact issue you just mentioned.
Great, yeah. I actually kind of building on that, I would love to hear about, we talked a little bit about process before. So thinking about that and this sort of iterative, agile approach to government tech, why is that so important? Why is it so important to release in batches rather than all at once? Why don't we start with you, Robert?
I mean, just in my mind, that's what we've done with little success over the many decades of specifically unemployment, but plenty of other government programs as well. And quite frankly, sadly, even with COVID in the recent rearview mirror, many of my colleagues in other states have taken that same approach of a big waterfall project, and with great fanfare with their governors and everybody else, and talking about they wanted to have an answer. Here's what we're doing. We're getting a new system. We're procuring a new system. And here, we're launching it today. Woohoo! But sadly, when I talk to many of them behind the scenes, they're absolutely miserable. And their staff is miserable because it doesn't work the right way. There's some little change they need to make, and it's going to take them 5 months. That's something that seems simple. It's just really not how, that's not how the private sector does it. Another example, in New Jersey, you mentioned that we launched our new customer-facing portal this year, but actually we launched it last year, I think in October, to 1 user. And then we launched it to 10 users. And then we launched it to 10% of users, and then 50% of users. So by the time we actually launched to 100% of users, it was sadly very anticlimactic. For all these years, we've been like, I can't wait for that day. It's finally going to happen. Here's the big day. And some Nava engineer just changed the number from 50 to 100, and there was no explosions. There was no pyrotechnics. But that was we had to have these positive therapy sessions about it, that it's okay. This is okay that we did it this way, and that's why it's been so successful, and that's why. The numbers of calls from complaints from legislators or outsiders or articles about it, while part of me is like, I wish they gave us more coverage of this, I know that that's not reality, and they'd only be giving us coverage if it went poorly. So that's why I think the agile development way, quite frankly, I'm not going to between my friend to the left. I think the USDL can mandate that we use agile development. The USDL can mandate that any funding they send out has these kind of processes. I'm not saying it was Andy should be doing it per se, but maybe in the future, because I really do think it's to the detriment. I understand the federated system that we have, and it's a federal unemployment system. Every state runs it on its own, and quite frankly, I think before COVID, I think a lot of states were way more about, this is our data, this is our thing, leave us alone, federal government. I think we're way more most other states are way more open than they used to be about having more input from the federal government about how these things should be working. And quite frankly, we're never going to have a real solution unless we take a stronger stand against doing things the old way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I agree that the one core challenge, and I hope people in this room working with states can think about their role in this, is that state capacity, to be able to, work in that. Because you definitely hear, on the business side, people saying like, my state is very limited capacity. I just need a out-of-the-box solution. I can't think about anything else that would be different than that. And so we are really trying to, through our projects and the ways we have influenced the technical assistance we provide, to kind of build up that capacity to build in that kind of smarter way. And we do think that, we've seen it. We have seen states, work. And Michigan's a great example. They are replacing their back end, but they've been working on changing their claimant journey, mapping it, giving people guideposts and guidance on how to work it using AI. So they're doing all these things that are iterative along the way, so that when they change their back end, like, they're going to have all that work and all that positive goodwill among their claimants. So it shouldn't be such a big thing. So I think we are seeing states, at least that are even going to change that big change, doing it in a little bit of a different way.
And speaking of claimant journeys, I want to talk about another process, wonky related topic. So why is factoring the customer experience and user experiences so important when it comes to building and improving these government programs? And I'll go ahead and start with you on this one.
Sure. Similar to why do you build small instead of building big, it doesn't work when you don't do it. If we have plenty of examples of that, plenty of them are in my gray swoosh, I've been a part of. I'd say there's a bigger piece at stake, which is the current project for all of us is building public trust and being seen. And so at its essence, this practice, which has been refined in the product development and tech space of listening maniacally and learning and the scientific method, making adaptations to make something better, is also a process that I think can bring us back to increasing public trust and in institutions and in government. And so really more of this, and there's very advanced ways of doing this with a trade of, like I have in my team of research and designers, but also there's lightweight ways Commissioner Asar Angelo does himself, which is just walking in the shoes of the experience of frontline workers and showing up in a call center and reading the top 5 things that people are calling about. And so I think sometimes we get overly precious about what we mean when we talk about customer experience. We need the full gamut. That's what's going to rebuild public trust.
I'm going to steal that term, maniacal listening. I love that.
Yeah, and in terms of modernization and why it's so important, I'm really interested in modernization specifically and its relationship to just increasing access and really reaching users. So Patricio, let's start with you in terms of facing financial shock. Why is access such an important part of it?
Yeah, so this anecdote has nothing to do with facing financial shock. An unnamed contract and an unnamed agency had a number of requirements around the exact browser versions that the site needed to run on. Those were out of date, and basically no one trying to access the site used those browser versions. And so while the vendor delivered what was in the contract, users did not have access to this at all. And I think this gets back into some of the agile development pieces of the discussion, right? if we are trying to build in a way for users to access our tools, we can't actually be writing waterfall contracts because we learn about the barriers to access as we put pilots out into the world, as we try things and we find out unexpected barriers that we weren't foreseeing. I also think there's some really interesting pieces around access where when states have the capacity problems that they had during the COVID pandemic, part of access is actually helping self-serve the 80% of customers that can self-serve so that phone lines are open for the 20% of people who cannot accomplish the task on their own. And so making sure that your sites are mobile friendly and people can load them on low bandwidth and all of those pieces add up to human beings being able to support the group of people who cannot self-serve and actually are available to help when needed. And I think that's been a focus of our work, is really trying to understand what is the way that we make this section of the population more efficient, and then for the other segments of the population that cannot be made more efficient by this process, what are additional tools that we're using to intervene, and also focus caseworker time on the cases that are really difficult and optimize the cases that are pretty quick and easy.
I guess my only addition to that, it makes me think about the principle of universal design, which is when you make things easier for people with disabilities, you make them easier for everyone. So I think we do both. You make it easier for that individual that's sophisticated. We talked to some recently, he's seen about his college graduates and his high school graduates in the States. Make it easier for them. Then it's going to be more easy. It's also going to be easier for that person who doesn't know how to use anything, but maybe someone in their family can show them how to use it. So that's, I think we do have to kind of be focused on that. I think the other thing I would say from my experience, modernizing a system is not necessarily with equitable access to benefits. Unless it's an intentional goal of the modernization to improve access to benefits, it can actually have the opposite effect. I remember before I came to the department, saw a demo of a SNAP modernization. I was like, that's a beautiful demo. Looks great, that site looks. It seems like it asks all the questions. But then I talked to someone on the ground. Said, oh no one can access SNAP in our state anymore. It's so complicated, can't do it. No one can do it. So I think that it just because something everything looks great, seems like it's very powerful, doesn't mean it's going to increase access benefits. We have to be intentional that that's our goal, and we have to measure it. We have to measure, does this system, is it making it harder or easier, and for who? Which demographics are challenging, and then we need to make our tweaks to it. So I think we have a long way to go, at least in UI and our systems, to taking the attitude that the most important day is not the day you launch, but the day, a month later when you're taking in the input of how it's going and you're thinking about the changes you need to be making.
And just to hit on that a little bit, I think it's obvious that the folks that we need to serve all the time don't have access to technology at all. So better websites, better systems might not help them. But it's not just about making, we've already talked about, letting our folks spend time on the claimants that need our help. But also before COVID, we didn't have in-person presence during COVID. We weren't going to return to it because it was so much more efficient time-wise for those who were able to call us. We got through way more claims that way, blah, blah, blah. But that really left a gap for folks who came to one of our one-stops in 19 locations across the state. But so having our folks be more efficient and having our new call center system be more efficient and get more calls through, gives us our staff space and our staff time to be in those offices and have a less efficient process time-wise, but have that face-to-face contact that so many claimants need and desire. So it's definitely a resource issue for sure. And quite frankly, there's no increase in our resources coming anytime soon for the most part. So having those efficiencies in your technology, while it might not directly be helping those folks, it gives us other freedoms of time and resources to give them more resources and time.
Can I think this question of modernization versus access is actually really important. And Andy, I'm looking at you because the federal government, the American Rescue Plan is not the first time we invested millions of dollars in the modernization of the UI system. The ARA, the rescue plan of the Obama era, invested $50 million in modernization efforts that all 50 states did and met their plans on prior to COVID. And so modernization as a goal allowed anyone to define what is modern. It wasn't about faster customer service, more equitable delivery, more people using the
About
program.
better ETA reporting, probably.
Or whatever your state determines. And so I think when we get focused on either a particular aspect of technology or modernization itself, I think we lose sight of really naming access as a goal. And so who cares if it's, I think modernization is a goal. I really need to ask, is that going to get us what we need? It didn't for the first round.
No, yeah, and I think that's certainly a core learning for us. That's not just about replacing a mainframe system like Robert has and 22 states still have 1980s based systems, or replacing a modernized system, something that came 2003 with a new system. It's really what are the goals behind it? What are you aiming for? And that's what we try to bring to this. And Congress gave us specific goals, so that will help us too. Equitable access to benefits, timely payment of benefits, and reducing fraud. So they gave us goals not about tech modernization, but actually about the end results of what that modernization would do.
Yeah, and I think just building on that, all of us here are civic technologists in the room, and I think so many of us do maybe get super stuck on smaller details, or we get burned out on some of these other barriers that we're facing. So I'm curious for all of you, just to kind of end this before we open it up. How do you sort of think about how we can kind of think about that big picture of systemic change and this long process of modernization? It's such a big challenge to create systemic change. So how can we kind of prevent ourselves from getting stuck on these smaller things and burning out?
I think, that's focused only on agile, but I think that's such an important part of the process. And I think the process behind getting to agile is very difficult for states because that's just not how procurement is done generally. So the learning curve for our procurement and budgeting staff, and quite frankly, our fiscal monitors, whether it be at USDOL or US Treasury during our ARPA funds, they're used to seeing a contract that has everything laid out for the next 3 years and what the costs are going to be and what's going to be going on next year, what's the deliverables. And it's hard to get folks to realize that that doesn't always work that way with agile development, which means that the most successful programs are going to be something new and difficult for the folks who are looking at our funds to comprehend. And if you talk to anybody in government who's been in government for a long time, especially career staff, the things they're most scared of are audits and findings. And so I think that being able to, this is super wonky and down in the weeds, but we really need to do a better job of educating our own state staff, fiscal staff, and other departments, and our Department of Labor about how this process can work. Because it's really, quite frankly, in my mind, the only way to be successful, big picture.
I guess I would sort of look back on how much progress we've made in the civic tech community writ large, right? Like, I work at USDS. USDS just celebrated our 10-year anniversary, and I talked to USDSers who were here 10 years ago, and there are just some basic tools of software development that they were just spending hours and hours fighting to try to get access to, that the people at USDS now we take for granted, right? Because those battles were already won. And I think it can be really demoralizing when you're in the trenches on your specific battle, trying to push that needle forward, and sometimes taking that step back and going like, we actually only existed for 10 years. Look at all of the progress we've made in 10 years. And that there are things that people tried really hard to accomplish and failed in their time, and that still moved the needle forward so that when the next group of USDSers came and picked up that problem, it was just that much easier. There's this metaphor we've been talking about as sort of like a bit of a relay race where each person takes the baton for their time at USDS and passes it along in a better place. And you don't necessarily know what, if you think your project failed, you don't actually know who's going to pick that back up a year, 5 years down the line and be able to take it that next step because of the inroads you made.
Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I'm going to open it up now to everybody else, are you all good? Great. So if folks have questions in the room, we can start there. And then we'll also have questions online as well. So I believe we have a microphone. Yeah. And yeah, Aaron, if you want to go ahead and get started.
Thanks. Are there any initiatives, Robert, that you're aware of? You mentioned improving the procurement and educating state actors. Are there any initiatives that you're aware of that are doing that, or any kind of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of improving that aspect of this?
Not that I'm aware of. Listen, I would say that the waterfall vendor lobby is very large and experienced and moneyed, and they know how to work things. And they have all kinds of associations, and so I don't know if there's an analog for agile companies, but I would recommend making one because that you need to have that kind of presence out there to host CTOs and CFOs and to go to different conferences and explain about this, work with legislatures about how to make it easier in state procurement law about how to go about this. And not to be crap, I mean, quite frankly, you need better lobbyists to make all this stuff easier for us implementers, right? I mean, we can't, a lot of this challenge wasn't because I or my CFO didn't want to do this stuff. It's because we had to go through, past practice, state law, and thank goodness for the GSA schedule, we were able to hop onto that, but that was even difficult. So I think having some kind of body that's going to be out there educating about this and quite possibly pushing for changes to state or federal law about making this process easier for folks is, I think, something that's needed. And most of the battles or hurdles with procurement are in policy that probably were good policy at the time about, I don't know, environmental regulations or making sure it's not, it's not corrupt, you're not giving it to the governor's friend or whatever it may be. And all of them, I'm sure, had a great purpose, but now they've all combined to really just stymie and stifle innovation, at least quick innovation that serves our customers. Okay. Sorry to sound so dour about it. Maybe you have a better answer. Here's the hopeful.
I have a slightly hopeful answer, which is that there is a federal program. The acronym is DITAP. I cannot remember for the life of me what the letters stand for. I'm sorry, but it is a program that USDS is pretty heavily involved with that trains federal procurement workers to learn about Agile, to better understand Agile procurement. If any of you are feds, consider signing up your procurement team to take DITAP. My understanding is that they shadow Agile software teams and actually get to be involved for, I think it's like a 2 to 3 week shadow session as part of the program to better understand Agile development, really live and breathe what those meetings are like and the outcomes you can sort of see by following those processes. I do not believe it is available for state workers at this time, but hey, it doesn't hurt to ask.
We're always second fiddle. We're used to it. Don't worry.
I also think it's a thing where, honestly, it has improved over time. And so if it becomes a program that is expanded, you will now get the benefits of the iterations that they have taken within themselves.
Cool.
Yeah, one thing I would say, part of my role is to interface with the department with members of Congress, and I think they want to know how to do things better. They ask us, how can we help this process of technology development so we don't invest in money in projects that fail. So I think there is openness to new ideas about how the statutes and how the funding could go out and make a difference.
Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I presume that states like California, even Texas, because they have much larger budgets and programs, get a lot of attention and influence. How does the diversity of states handle this regard? Like smaller states need these kinds of things, and maybe there's a cadre for them or not. But I guess how do you partner with the states to deal with this? That the biggest states that could do the most good probably are not.
I mean, one thing is, I would say, at least in some of the programs, and you guys may disagree, there's actually there's not that much different than it takes to run a program in Rhode Island versus California. Yes, at a different scale, but there's just as much complexity in the rules, there's just as much need for income verification. So I think one of the challenges is that the smaller states, they need just as much sophistication. And one thing that I would say positive that I've seen in some of the smaller states have taken that actually to really embrace more agile development and to embrace open source, to embrace it. We're only going to build something in this state that my team can manage.
I was just to add to that, New York, California, Texas. So basically, we're all funded on both states are 100% federally funded for all their UI costs, for all the payment for staff, technology, whatever it is. So it's based on population. So obviously, New York, Texas, California have humongous federal UI budgets. So like Andy said, they need to write the same program or whatever, or make the same system as Rhode Island does. Unfortunately, Rhode Island only has 1/100th of the funding to make that happen. So it is a major challenge. I think more and more states, I think even ever since COVID, more states are having more state funding put towards UI admin, but it's not sustainable. And that's why, quite frankly, like Andy said, the open source and agile is even more important, because there needs to be better pathways for California's learnings with federal dollars be able to be shared with Rhode Island, Vermont, and other smaller states at the same time. But unfortunately, every state, even though it's a federal program, every state has its own UI rules and policy, which is also another huge challenge. Like I would guess probably no two states that are exactly the same at all, not even close.
Great. Yeah, I think we had one question over here.
Hey there, Julius Chang with the Department of Health, and this is a fascinating conversation here because as a procurement specialist within the department, I can't imagine not or putting out a requirement today that is waterfall. So, I'd love to see how states could, fast follow what the federal government is doing. I've been trained in agile practices for ever since I joined the Fed for 10 years ago. And I hope that maybe this is an example, working with Nava on the Advanced Ed project, how we can showcase how agile development can yield true public benefits faster than traditional methods as a future use case for presentations like this. But on to my other question, or my actual question for Andy. You mentioned that early on in your tenure with the Department of Labor that user testing was a major deficiency of a lot of these state programs. What did it take to convince these states to incorporate that into their procurements to actually achieve better results in this next round of modernization?
I mean, I think there's a couple things. One, that we had some funding to really prioritize it and talk about it. But I also think that was an ingredient. I think the bigger ingredient was you had millions of Americans really frustrated with the customer experience. And you had governors in the state, some of them making the bad decision, just firing people. But I think also recognizing, okay, we really have to improve this program, and if we're going to build it, we have to really respond to all these, comments. So I think, and as people started doing it, I do think they see it works. It works to make it better. If you want to update your claimant status portal to get less calls in your call center, it really does make sense to talk to people on what their pain points are. What are the things that they're really struggling to, to understand.
I'll just say real quick. I mean, even though it's better than the one state Andy mentioned before, it's not that much better. I mean, a lot of states still are not doing user testing. However, because of COVID, at least in New Jersey, I mean, we almost had like live user testing of our old system because we had so many comments through legislative portals, and we, within a month or two of March 17th, we had an online referral system for the legislative offices, and I can't tell you what a trove of data that is for how our system was failing people. So it wasn't like we were sitting there with them and taking notes, but we'd hear from so often, especially when it comes to the PUA programs, other federal programs, what was wrong, how our application was failing them, or whatever it was. Like we just had so much data and we when the first thing coming in, we're like, hey, UI director, we're hearing this. Oh no, that's not a thing. That only affects very small population. Well, when there's 1.5 million claimants, that small population is now 20,000, 30,000 people. So with that, I think all states, however they're collecting their data, do have live experience of user testing by accident during COVID.
I also just want to add, our experience working with states has been that very few have the full picture of the user experience, right? So there may have been user testing on a specific part of the website or a specific, or just the website generally, but they don't have a full user journey map or a process map to understand the actual end-to-end and the number of touch points that happen and the ways that lack of clarity on the site create these like cycles of touch points because the applicant didn't understand, so they submitted the wrong things, and the caseworker has to reach out, and then that's all verbal, none of that's written down anywhere, so then they still submit the wrong thing, and it takes a number of tries to get it right. And I think that's sort of like the next level up as we continue to prioritize customer experience is the full end-to-end journey, and like from application to receipt of benefits. How many touch points were there? Were they online? Were they via mail? Were they in person, right? Like understanding that end to end is, I think, something that we should all be striving towards.
Yeah, my goal is to have, like, when you go to the doctor and if you're an online system, they get an after visit summary. I want every time somebody talks to us or touches us with it, they get an after visit summary of what are their current benefits, what is the next step they have to do, what's the medication you have to get, or giving us information, or surveys you need to answer, or do your ID verification. Just as it's like a standardized form, and they can see how it changes throughout the process. It's probably not gonna happen before I leave, but it's on my priority list.
Great. Any other questions in the room? Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Oh, I'm so sorry.
Hi, Commissioner. You've talked a few times now about the resource constraints. Do you have a sense on what funding increase the states would each need to actually start meeting the modernization efforts that you would like to achieve on an annual basis?
It's certainly been very expensive in New Jersey, which is, we've been luckily with ARPA funding and Andy's help and USDOL support, and some state funding from other ARPA sources. I don't know enough about what that would, but it would be a significant portion of the current admin funding, just to have. Quite frankly, I feel like the cost is, and not to scare folks, it's unlimited, because modernization should never be over. So looking years out, and like I said, some states have separate admin funding, and God willing, there'll be a bill up in New Jersey on Monday about that as well, which would be a game changer for us, for sure, to make sure that what we've done already in New Jersey is long lasting. But I'm sure that folks are out there who have estimates about what that would cost. But I would hope that over time, and as we're doing a better job of sharing information and open source, those costs will continue to go down.
I think we had one more question here in the front, Greg.
I'm curious, so in the different states, and I guess the federal government as well, you have Department of Labor over here doing unemployment. We've got one or more other departments over here administering various other programs. And I'm curious if you've seen some of the successes or lessons learned from the unemployment work being adopted by other departments, or vice versa, other ones that have brought stuff that's been adopted by UI, or even working together for people who are applying for multiple of these at the same time.
Yep, certainly, great question. Certainly, even our own department, Tara talked before about our work on paid family medical leave in New Jersey. We're going through that modernization now. We have lots of learnings from our UI modernization, which is still ongoing, obviously. Some of those learnings we're taking advantage of. Some of them we're forgetting things too quickly. But I think that, especially when it comes to the customer service side of things and the call centers and how to deal with backlogs, like I know that we've been discussing for example, New Jersey, we have a property tax rebate program called Anchor that is somewhat new, and the folks from our innovation team, which is sort of a bunch of like USDS alums and other folks like that who introduced us to Nava and Agile development in the first place. They also work with them, so I know that they're implementing their learnings from our call center, how to make that more efficient with that program as well. So yeah, we're just definitely seeing a lot more of that. I certainly wish, sort of trite to say breaking down silos, but it's always the goal of everybody. But obviously, there's different statutes in place and different program policies. But we're always trying to, quite frankly, warn my colleagues all the time. But I think it's hard for them because most of them don't have a program that's going to have the impact that a UI program would have when there's a pandemic like that. but yeah, we're always looking to share that with other divisions internally to our department, which is vast, and externally as well.
I think really often it doesn't jump necessarily from department, like all of a sudden Health and Human Services is doing it and over here in the comptroller's office there, but it does travel with the people you invest in. And so, I mean, Rob, just hearing you, Jillian Gutierrez, who is the first chief customer service officer of UI,
yes, the UI director of the UI office of UI modernization,
was the lead partner in the paid leave uptake improvement process. Or in my own experience with our sprints with states, we'll often have someone who we invest in deeply as a commissioner of X in state, and then they show up as the commissioner of X in the federal government or in another state. And so the kind of investment in the capacity.
Is that a thing?
Yeah, like
Okay.
someone who was like a lead in childcare agency somewhere gets recruited to the next state that expands childcare and brings with them, in paid leave, we have at least 2 paid leave directors who've left one state and moved to another state and brought the experiences of their one state with them to another. And so I think that kind of investment in a team, pays dividends, and investment in agency leaders pay dividends in a way that is like not necessarily jumping in a state from one location to another, but that we've seen that numerous times in which the practices get advanced.
I would say that some of this coordination across agencies is actually a policy issue more than a desire, to work together. So we had some successes in that. There was a law passed in 2019 that allowed programs like ours that are federal state partnerships to access Treasury's do not pay data. So now we can get access to that data and pass it to our states so they can use the same data that federal programs use to see, for example, whether someone's fraudulently applying with a deceased individual's social security number. Well, we had to reinvent the wheel because we didn't have access to that data before. So that it really often is a policy issue why different programs aren't working together as well as they could be.
And from the facing financial shock work, that is kind of explicitly our goal, right? The Biden-Harris administration put out the Customer Experience Executive Order back in December 2021, and it basically says agencies work together to focus on the customer experience. I'm sure no one approved that as the summary, but we'll work with it, right? Like the entire point is that we are bringing agencies together to say, like, we need to focus on how we deliver benefits to the public and make sure it meets the public in their moment of need, whether that is like us facing a financial shock or as you are about to have a child, right, or approaching retirement, right, that a number of government agencies should be supporting you in that time, and we should be working together to accomplish that. So we've been sharing out our learnings with all the agencies we're working with. We've also been sharing out our learnings with the states that we're partnered with. We have working groups with the states that we are piloting in, where states get to come together and talk to each other and collaborate and ask questions and provide feedback. And we've found that that's been a really helpful way to sort of spread some of the learnings of our work.
Thank you. I want to make sure are there any questions coming in through online that we might have missed? Okay, great. We're at time, but if there's any more questions, maybe we can do one wrap up. No? All right. I think that was a great question to wrap on. So thank you so much. This was fantastic. Let's just have a big round of applause for all of our panelists.